Understanding the ODA Procedures Manual is an important aspect of the ODA in-house training. As a unit member, however, being clear on your responsibilities and the ODA's expectations is probably the most important material to you personally. Welcome to the module where we'll cover all unit member responsibilities and how you're impacted by what needs to be done as a unit member. As mentioned before, if you have questions regarding any material covered in this video, please email or call Jeff Maskowitz at the contact information provided. The objectives of this part of the training is to 1. Review unit member authorized functions so each person understands what their own authority means. 2. Look at the recent changes so their impact to how the ODA functions is understood. And 3. Helping each unit member focus on their part of the ODA as a whole. Section 4 in the manual discusses the responsibilities of everyone within the ODA unit: the lead administrator, other administrators, and unit members. Refer to this paragraph for the specific details for each unit member type. The general responsibilities that carry across all unit members include meeting the qualifications for the functions that you're authorized for, complying with the ODA Procedures Manual, cooperating with the FAA whenever the opportunity presents itself, and ensuring that your work, whether it be filling out forms, reviewing data, or conducting an inspection, should all be accurate and correct. This particular item deserves a bit of emphasis placed on it, as accuracy on forms is always targeted in internal and FAA audits. Unit members need to take special care when reviewing, drafting, and signing ODA forms. Typos are easy to make, but not as easy to detect, so please watch for mistakes. Make sure you perform only the functions that have been authorized to you specifically. If for any reason you cannot perform your authorized functions, make sure and notify the appropriate ODA administrator, and complete an annual activity summary to show that the work accomplished as a unit member every year. If needed, we also want you to help develop new unit members by serving as a mentor or on an evaluation panel as part of the selection process. More specifically for engineering unit members, or EUMs, in addition to the responsibilities already mentioned, you're also expected to assist in identifying the proper compliance path and conformity requirements for a project, to review and approve compliance data when appropriate, sometimes to support conformity inspections only. These are function codes 11.010, 40, 50, 11.130, 60, and 11.070. You also are expected to approve test plans, witness tests, and conduct aircraft ground evaluations or compliance inspections for function codes 11.070 and 11.110. And finally, also reviewing nonconformances and determining the appropriate disposition for those that happen. Manufacturing unit members' responsibilities include issuing airworthiness certificates if authorized for function codes 11.061, 62, 66, and 610. For conforming articles, test setups or installations as required, and completing the related forms accurately for function codes 11.80, 11.090, and 11.100. Completing Part 1 of the TIA and completing the STIR forms as requested. Witnessing data collection for pass-fail types of testing where an EUM may not be required. And also assisting with issue resolution if the need ever arises. And last but not least of the unit members, the ICA unit member is responsible for being able to successfully demonstrate the ability to develop an acceptable ICA and find the final document acceptable. To be able to review ICAs presented for an STC project and ensure it's complete, meets the regulatory requirements, and FAA Order 8110.54 for function code 11.180. In addition, coordinating with the AEG when needed, and providing feedback when there's room for process improvements needed to make the ICA review authorization more robust. With all of the functions for the ODA divided across our unit members, it may not be obvious who has authority to accomplish which roles. For clarity, this is defined in two ways. First, all authority and delegated functions are spelled out specifically for each person using the ODA unit member listing. When the listing is updated, it is emailed to all active unit members, so you'll always have the most up-to-date information. You'll know you have the one that's been accepted by the FAA because they mark it with a red stamp. When you see your specific listing, EUMs will know that there's a matrix that looks nearly identical to what would be found in Order 8110.37. X's are marked for those areas where you have authority, and it probably looks very similar to what you may have as a DER if you have that FAA designation. This may not always be the case, however, as authority is based on what's been delegated to the ODA, which may not always include the same functional areas. Special authorizations and limitations are also spelled out for each individual. In addition to the technical matrices for MUMs and ICAUMs, there's a page for each individual defining the ODA function codes that are associated with the person and the corresponding forms that can be used to document accomplishment of that function. Upon becoming a unit member, make sure you understand your role as a unit member, fully accept your responsibilities and obligations, and agree to work within the constraints provided in the ODA Procedures Manual. If there are any concerns in doing this, please talk with one of the ODA administrators. One area added for engineering unit members in Revision C of the ODA Procedures Manual was the definition of technical specialists. It helps in some areas, such as system safety or software, to highlight this unique capability so that it's easier to focus in on who could do a particular job, as well as understand who may have additional training requirements to stay current. Understanding training requirements is important, as the ODA is required to make sure everyone stays current. However, the FAA has been updating their approach over the last few years, making it a little bit difficult. They are moving more and more toward providing their recurrent training online and charging an annual fee so that designees can pick and choose what they want to take and have access to training when it's convenient. This isn't the case for all training, but for those that are moving in this direction, the courses should be available in July 2017. The fees associated with taking FAA initial and recurrent training are the unit member's responsibility. The timeframes for taking FAA training are also changing, where it used to be necessary to go through recurrent training every 2 years for an EUM and 3 for an MUM. The FAA is moving toward an annual schedule along with an annual fee, at least for the EUMs right now. ODA in-house training is also a requirement. However, it will remain on a 2-year cycle at this time. As you can see, Westar is also moving toward an online format so that unit members are able to go through the material in a time frame that fits in each person's schedule. Similar to FAA training, a quiz will be used at the end of the training to document that you've completed all the modules successfully. Unit members cannot perform any authorized functions if their training requirements are not met, so it's important to make sure all training is completed on time. Dawn will send out emails and reminding you when due dates are getting close. As an ODA with a small number of unit members, Westar is faced with balancing the need to remain fully staffed, but also to not have inactive unit members. The ODA recognizes the costs associated with staying current with training may not pound out if there isn't enough work for a unit member to justify the expense. This is an area that's being looked at to find a happy medium and possibly make improvements so that there are fewer inactive unit members on the list. After you've fulfilled all of the unit member training requirements, you're allowed to participate in Westar ODA projects. Section 15 is the section of the ODA Procedures Manual that you're going to want to be able to have the most familiarity with, as these paragraphs spell out all the processes the ODA uses to reach the issuance of an STC approval. Unit members must follow the processes as written, so remember to always refer to the manual, as the Westar ODA may do things differently than other ODAs you may work with as a unit member. Unit members are involved from the very beginning of a project by reviewing certification plans and helping ensure the ODA is able to identify all the applicable regulations, methods of compliance, conformity needs, testing requirements, and how to make sure flight testing is accomplished successfully. It's crucial that unit members put in the time necessary to conduct a thorough review of the certification plan. Of course, changes can occur downstream when differences are identified, but as an ODA, the preference is to minimize the number of changes needed. Everyone needs to work together to reduce surprises at the end of a project. Westar is relying on your technical expertise. In Revision C of the Procedures Manual, Appendix F was updated to address certification plan expectations, Certification plans that you see in the future should be similar in format to what is given in Appendix C, with only minor variations due to project complexity, safety aspects, etc. Items expected for consistency that were added to the outline include a list of page effectivity, project introduction, listing certification guidance material, listing data submitted to show compliance that includes the master drawing list, compliance data, installation documentation, and FAA submittals, and AD research. Going forward, the conformity inspection plan will also be accepted by each discipline by signature too. Edits also state that when the ODA receives a response letter to the P&L, this will imply acceptance of the conformity inspection plan. After your review as a unit member, you'll be asked for concurrence. Your concurrence indicates that you have reviewed the plan and that for your technical area and authorized functions, what is proposed is accurate and complete. Once the plan is in place, design and compliance data will be coordinated for review and approval and acceptance. In the previous version of the procedures manual, it spoke to providing information via a secured network. However, Westar doesn't use that type of approach, so that reference has been removed. Unit members will be emailed the information that needs to be reviewed. The project tracking form that was used in the past also required due dates. This has been removed, so watch for a due date provided in the email message instead. Timeliness is always appreciated, so working to shrink the review process is always a goal. That full concurrence can be achieved in less than a week if possible. When it's time to approve some data, Dawn will draft an 8100-9 and email to unit members for their review. Don't assume that it's been sent to you error-free. Double check that the data really is complete and that it's approvable. Even templates used can contain mistakes, so please review everything that's sent your way. Airplane Flight Manual Supplement approval has changed in reviews in C as well. We still have flight test unit members provide 8100-9s with recommend approval in the same manner as in the past, but the Appendix G format for AFMS has changed the signee from the OMT lead to the ODA administrator. This will help in the final coordination for signatures. One of the big changes in Revision C that applies to EUMs was incorporating the concept of a compliance inspection into a broader review of conducting aircraft ground evaluations, which include compliance inspections. This authority is beyond the requirements defined in Order 8100.8 and has additional training requirements as well, so will be noted as a special function. Engineering unit members will conduct an aircraft ground evaluation when there isn't a clear understanding of the entire environment on the aircraft that is being modified, so the integration of a new design needs to be verified with reference to what's already on the airplane. Other reasons for conducting a ground evaluation may be when compliance can't be determined from reviewing drawings or reports only. Checklists have been developed for interiors, electrical, and structural reviews and can be found in Appendix I. Form WSA-ODA-F046 covers interior compliance. F047 is for electrical systems, F048 is structures, and F049 will be used to document discrepancies. The general process starts by using the checklist, and EUM will evaluate the integration of the modification amongst all the aircraft elements that may be in place, document any discrepancies that may be found, have the design changed accordingly, and the manufacturing unit member will reconform the aircraft. Then, the EUM will repeat the evaluation to verify no discrepancies exist, or repeat that process until all is compliant. Manufacturing unit members are relied on for conducting all conformity inspections. When an RFC is generated, engineering unit members help identify what needs to be conformed and provide the design approval. When the RFC is ready for release, the project ODA administrator will sign and issue it to the appropriate MUM so that they know what needs to be conformed. MUMs have the difficult job of working with suppliers, repair stations, and customers who don't always understand 2133 and the idea that they're responsible for 100% inspection of the items they manufacture or install on an airplane. Agents who sign off on 8130-9 forms are not always the most knowledgeable about the certification process or where they fit in with their inspections. A lot of times when people not directly involved in certification hear the word conformity, they assume the MUM is doing all the inspections rather than just spot checking the work the company was expected to accomplish. That piece of education usually falls squarely on an MUM's shoulders for the ODA. If anyone has suggestions for helping these agents understand the process better, Jeff's open to your ideas. In many cases, the ODA unit members need to be the leaders, the experts in certification, and lead the other parties through the process. Switching gears a bit, the conformity discrepancy process has been improved in Revision C of the manual. In the past, the manual referred to 2193 as the guidelines for determining if a discrepancy needed to be addressed or not. However, 2193 isn't applicable to a prototype environment. So now engineering unit members will review a discrepancy to determine if it's acceptable, meaning the issue has no bearing on compliance or not, meaning there's a change to compliance, it could affect safety, or simply needs to be redesigned. Discrepancies should be noted by the company inspector on their 8130-9 prior to presenting it to the manufacturing unit member. Data revised to address a discrepancy will need an 8100-9 for approval, and the company will need to inspect the change, providing a new 8130-9. Once an article or installation has been conformed, the ODA can move forward with any testing that may have been identified. A clarification in the manual made in Revision C is that test witnesses are engineering unit members, not anyone else. Westar uses the normal approach to building up confidence through the test program, meaning bench testing is completed prior to ground testing, which is done before flight testing. One thing to note from this manual change, though, is that when testing has been completed, test reports must contain the statement, "Testing was satisfactorily completed," assuming that it was. When the ODA has reached the point to move into flight testing, a TIA will be coordinated with the applicable unit members to authorize each involved unit member to accomplish their function, whether that be conducting conformity inspections identified in Part 1 or witnessing flight tests spelled out in Part 2. Revision C has new information regarding TIA contents, and the process has been updated. Appendix E11 describes what should be included in each block. Westar uses the new version of the FAA form, though you may see the older version in the manual. Unit members conducting Part 1 or 2 of the TIA should read the sections closely, as the steps are very specifically written for Westar operations. Airworthiness certification may also be issued in association with TIA issuance. As a rule of thumb, remember that Westar uses a 30-day line in the sand as the norm for shirt pocketing. When the project manager has completed his review of everything identified on the project tracking form and ensured all compliance has been addressed, he will coordinate with the project administrator so steps can be taken to complete the project. Project closeout includes reviewing the data presented by the applicant or project manager, signing the STC certificate, the 8100-11 statement of completion, approving the master data list, AFMS if applicable, and airworthiness limitations section of the ICA, assuming there aren't any new additions. All project records will be retained indefinitely on behalf of the FAA. You're responsible for keeping track of the activities you were involved with during the year. You must provide an annual report using ODA form WS ODA F023. The list provided will be given to an ODA advisor who will review the work to verify performance has been adequate and meets all requirements. As with other unit members, the ICA UM will also be required to provide a yearly activity summary report. The last thing, as a unit member, you should be aware that the forms you're authorized to sign. Appendix D in the manual specifically defines which forms are used by which unit members. Make sure you're only using the forms authorized for you to sign off on. For example, some ODAs may authorize EUMs to sign off conformity deviations on the 8100-1 conformity inspection record. Westar, however, does not authorize this use of the form. In the recent manual change, forms were added for ICA UM functions too, with WSA ODA F038 serving as documentation for ICA acceptance, and WSA ODA F039 for the ICA impact assessment to determine if a change will be required and an ICA needed to be updated. Though not listed in the forms list for authorizing unit member signatures, to support the ODA audit process, new forms have been added as well. Auditors will record discrepancies found on Form WS ODA F044, and a summary of all findings will be captured on an inspection survey sheet, or Form WSA ODA F045. So if you're a unit member serving as an auditor, you'll want to be familiar with these new forms as well. Instructions are provided in the manual for all forms. In conclusion, this briefing on unit member responsibilities was not intended to cover process details that are included in the procedures manual. You'll need to review the manual to be fully familiar with its contents. What you should understand at the conclusion of this discussion, however, is that updates have been made to the manual that affect the way the ODA accomplishes each of the authorized functions. Being aware of the training changes that the FAA is making, new test results expectations, and where to find specific processes is important to working within the ODA environment. If you have any questions regarding this video, please contact Jeff, the ODA Lead Administrator, at the posted phone number or email address.